Nice.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
What's going on, everybody? It's FREEDO here for your Overwatch. We got talk about Boops, Baptiste, the Overwatch League stage finals just finished. Talk a bit about that and a bunch more news stories in between. First up, xQc gives us a demonstration on how the new Boop works. First up, xQc gives us a demonstration on how the new knockbacks work in Overwatch.
It's crazy to me that Boop used to be like, you know, like if you're running and you're booped, it goes like, okay. Back in the days, right? If you're booped, if you go like this, oh, boom, oh, boom, oh, right? And now it's like, oh, boom, you know? Dude, now it's like, I'm a Winston, dude. I'm like, oh, boom, holy shit. Like, dude, what the is wrong with this game?
I thought that clip was pretty hilarious and also very accurate to the strength of all the knockbacks in the game now. I try to warn you about this, guys. I'm seeing a lot of it on social media, on Reddit, etc. Boops are insane now. So much so that I would go as far to say that Lucio got buffed this patch overall, despite having a bit of a team nerf. I think the thought process for Blizzard was to make Boops reliable so that you could knock targets out of Immortality Field and have that interaction feel like it always worked how you'd expect, but by doing so, we ended up buffing Brig and Lucio, who's at the core of Goat's comp. So the good news, I think Ashe and Junkrat and the bunker combo are legit as well, because they're already good against Goats, and now with the knockback changes are good against Dive. But other than that, the majority of the strength from the knockback rework goes in the hands of Lucio, Brig, a bit of Wrecking Ball. Basically, crowd control is just incredibly strong. Anybody who's got a button that moves you might as well be an insta-kill in some situations now. If you want to hear more on my thoughts on how Goats got better due to these knockback changes, you can check out the other video that I'll put a card to now on screen. Otherwise, moving on, Baptiste has some bugs, interactions, little parts about his kit that are broken right now. First up, this is demonstrated by ML7.
The sphere for it, like, is bigger at his gun. I'm in the same line of sight. So, turn around. Okay, you shift. Now turn. Don't look at me, just shift. And now look at me. And in case you're saying that he cannot heal backwards, he can heal backwards. Turn around and shift. No, yeah, I'm damaged. Just turn around. The problem is that if you look straight up at the target, you have a bigger area of effect.
So that's a really weird interaction, so when you're playing Baptiste, try to keep in mind that your regenerative burst goes farther if you're aiming at the target, which I don't think is something they intended, but feels kind of skillful, I guess, but probably should get changed. Also, I wonder if some other aura type abilities are subject to this kind of problem. That'll have to get tested out. More on Baptiste. Redditor Sirius shows off that there's an animation cancel that allows you to fire both his primary fire and alternate healing fire at once. This is done by sneaking in a shot in between your healing nades, so as long as you keep the pace of shooting both, you're going to be outputting more overall. Now, of course, this is going to require your aim to go haywire as you quickly flick to the thing you're shooting and then your teammates who are probably in a different spot, so it's probably rare that you're going to get the Coalescence-esque dream where you're lining up enemies and teammates into the same line of fire effectively, but an interesting to note nonetheless. Another bug has been found recently as well, where Meteor Strike is supposed to do 300 damage at its point of contact, but for some reason isn't killing the Immortality Field when you target it. At the moment, nobody's really sure if this is because the field is hovering above the ground, so it does less for some reason, but it's even when you land directly on it, so we'll see if Blizzard addresses that. Also on Reddit, user Shady asks, can we all agree to call it the lamp? In an interview, Jeff said at early development, they actually used a lamp texture as a placeholder for what now turns out to be the Immortality Field, which is like a drone thing that hovers in air. But it does light things up, and I think that's a pretty quick call out. I've been calling it Field in my games, but I think shoot the lamp makes a lot of sense, as long as people don't just start shooting the street lights or something on the map instead. I think we all can get behind this as a good call out. Next up, I'm really excited about this. I hope you guys are as well, because it changes how many creators make content. Jayne gives us a bit of a leak on his stream on when we can expect the Overwatch League viewer.
from what I hear, and I don't know if this is public, but this might be a leak. But as far as I'm aware, the Overwatch League teams are getting access to the viewer for Stage 2, and then I think the goal is for it to be available to everyone for Stage 3.
And then one question on top of that, will they also launch it for the general game as well at the same time? Because something that I think Blizzard often has a disconnect with is making sure that they're servicing both the community that actually plays the game, not just their mega multi-million-dollar esports Overwatch League. Because really, most fans aren't going to go into the replay system and utilize it. It's a small percentage of us, but a lot more people do like to watch back their own games or utilize their own gameplay to make cool videos or finally get a perspective on what the heck our Genji was doing all game. FREEDO, that's toxic. Speaking of toxicity, website Gamasutra did an interview with research developer at Blizzard, Natasha Miller, who reports that disruptive behavior is down 40% since the implementation of the endorsement system, which I guess I could see. But my question is, what relationship does the overall level of toxicity reports, disruptive behavior have to active player base numbers? Because from what I can tell, since LFG and the endorsement system came out, I mean, that feels like 6 years ago. Has the player base just diminished to a point where a big chunk of that leaving is due to people just not playing anymore? I don't really know. Whenever corporations give out percentages like this, you got to ask these questions because we don't really know. Because if I had to guess, I would say that the current player base is much smaller than what it was when the system came out, actually. So are these numbers scaled and averaged out to reflect the percentage of the player base that it holds, or is it just a big percentage of people left? A friend of ours, Nateson, made a pretty interesting video on endorsements, and he makes an argument that most of the problem players you encounter in your games are unendorsed players. So maybe us as the community might not agree that we all care about endorsements, because I don't think most of us do, but lacking them is sort of a indicator that you might not be the most positive force in the Overwatch community, or at least not yet. A lot of times these players make a new account, don't really care, play whatever they want, no matter what the team comp is or the situation calls for, because, hey, it's a disposable account. Those players often aren't going to get endorsed, because A, they don't play on that account enough, they treat it as disposable, and B, well, they aren't exactly the most endorsable teammates ever. So it's an interesting observation, and Nathan's conclusion or suggestion is probably a bit controversial, but I think it's something interesting to think about. He says that there should be a queue limitation to try to separate endorsement level 1 or 0 players together and try to put everybody else together who was trying to be a good teammate, flexible, things like that. Essentially to try to give us a tangible reward for actually not being a level 1 or 0 endorsement level player. Now, I think this is very obviously never going to happen because it would split the player base, and that's something Blizzard never wants to do. And I think I'd say there's more of a problem of people feeling like it's okay to have a disposable account on Overwatch. That's the real issue. Now, doing this system that Nateson's saying would do that, but I wonder if there's other solutions that we can get put into the game that reduces people's affinity to want to have alt accounts that they use just to kind of play selfishly. Monte Cristo recently made a video that I think is an inevitability on so many fronts for Overwatch. Locked 222 role queue. This would help do it because it does many things, including somewhat diminish the need to have alt accounts to play a different role. It also, of course, makes the game a lot easier to balance, and I would describe it as a way to cut down on power creep overall. Multi-tank strats have always been a thing in Overwatch. They were only really unbeatable once Brigitte came into the mix. And we need ways to cut through that power creep because pure balancing alone makes it almost impossible to fix without leaning one way too hard. You have to break the meta in a way to force something else to be good, and then it's just dominant all of a sudden. And I think this is the problem Blizzard's dealing with right now. They didn't go ahead and nerf Break more, which I think she most definitely needed it if we wanted goats to go away, because in fear for players out there that don't pick her as a DPS, they try to play her as a healer. Well, she's pretty hard to play that way. She's still very strong, by the way. This idea that you can't play Brig ever, it's a problem when you've got multiple player bases playing a character in vastly different ways. So they have to choose, do we balance for the people optimizing her in 3 support or for the people playing her in 2-2-2? The best solution, I think, is make the whole game 2-2-2 because that's the easiest thing for people to wrap their heads around, and it also fixes the meta, it lets us have role queue, it does like 1,000 things at once. We know Jeff Kaplan's on board with it, most of the community thinks it's a necessity, on multiple fronts, so I think it's just a matter of time until Blizzard flips the switch. And yes, it would have to rebalance a ton of characters, but that's fine. Bring it on. Just let me get the role I want when I queue for it so that we have balanced team comms every game in ranked. That's going to be a whole new world and do way more for Toxicity than endorsements ever could. Next up, this is an adorable story. The diva voice actress Charlotte Chung shared on Twitter that she's bringing a new life into the world. And I apologize for this. My wife sent me this and I just had to share it. Baby diva. Get it? Okay, I'll see myself out now. Moving on, we're going to talk about Overwatch League now, as the Stage 1 playoffs concluded last week. We'll get a week's break, and the action for Stage 2 will kick up again next week, Thursday, April 4th. But there's some cool things I wanted to pick up on from last week's playoff games. Dafran and the Atlanta Reign kind of bombed out in the playoffs, and after the loss, Dafran did a crying stream where he pouted and moped and fake cried melodramatically, playing sad music in the background. When you try so hard but you don't succeed, hello darkness my old friend, that kind of stuff. I know we should feel bad for him losing, but he's putting on a show here and it made me laugh. I don't think I've ever seen an esports player utilize a loss as effectively as Dafran does here. Cheer up, Dafran. You'll get him next stage. As for the final between San Francisco Shock and Vancouver Titans, it was an outrageous series and a massive heartbreaker because like 3/4 of the way through the grand final, it seemed like San Francisco Shock was going to win. They were up 3-2. Super was outplaying Bumper's Reinhardt all series long. Played a much cleaner game of Reinhardt, but Vancouver make miracles happen. They clutch out the 6th map, King's Row, take it onto Rialto, where Shock has a very powerful push. Okay, finishing the map with like a minute left on Rialto doesn't happen very often because each stage of Rialto is so easy to defend. There's horrible chokes and defender's advantage everywhere, so many teams don't even finish the map. Shock does it with a minute left, but then Vancouver Titans pull out the cheat codes. They push Rialto and set a new record for the fastest completion time ever. And although maybe they had a chance to do a miraculous hold, Bumper charges 2 Earth Shatters in 2 fights, and the last fight they focused down Super to make a clear Earth Shatter attempt for Bumper. Despite essentially feeding the entire series, he closes out as the victor, still undefeated. As the map ended, we saw Super, who had tears in his eyes, just destroyed after the loss. Absolutely heartbreaking. He played the best series of his life and still lost the final. That's rough. He said this on his stream, following up on a lot of the trash talk he gave to Bumper before playing.
You know what? I engaged in the banter with Bumper. I called him out on Sideshow's stream on my team. I said he was trash. I said he gets carried by his team. Yeah, I did say that. But you know what, dude? At the end of the day, this guy talked the talk, went 7-0 in the stage, didn't lose a single map in their first 2 stage playoffs, and then in the finals wins a nasty 4-3 game that could have gone either way. Okay, dude? I can respect it. He talked the talk and backed it up. You got robbed MVP? Yeah, because I didn't f***ing win, dude. Because I lost. Because I'm a loser. Because I'm a f***ing loser. Okay, you understand?
Well, guys, that's going to be everything for today's video. I hope you did enjoy it, and if you did, please be sure to leave it a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content, and if you haven't already, please subscribe, and be sure to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news updates and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for Your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.